Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Copyright 4 Little Rabbits. Also, there's a full stop at the end of every one of those lines. They wouldn't do that now. They don't put a dot after the text in this sort of thing. It's interesting. Even the little copyright there. The University of Iowa Libraries, from the library of James M. and Christine K. Wallace. XPZ5P86P3. What the devil is this? Skipping that, and this blank page, and that one. A picture of a rabbit, hunched over a bed, with a rabbit lying in it. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. But yeah, I read that already. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Spot the odd one out. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
"Now, my dears,"
said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning,
"you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out."
Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella, and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden, and squeezed under the gate, First he ate some lettuces and some broad beans, and then he ate some radishes.
"Radishes, darling, radishes. I want me some radishes."
And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether, if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and cried big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Curtice you!" That's what it says. Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She shook her head at him. Peter began to cry again. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. There surely never was such a garden for cabbages! Hundreds and hundreds of them, and Peter was not tall enough to see over them, and felt too sick to eat them. It was just like a very bad dream. In the middle of the garden he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went towards the tool shed again, but suddenly there was a most peculiar noise. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. Then someone began to sing. 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! 3 blind mice! It sounded disagreeable to Peter. It made him feel as though his own tail were going to be cut off. His fur stood on end. After a time, as nothing happened, Peter came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate! Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner! But Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood, outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Excuse me. Shouldn't have pronounced it that way. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Most peculiar old bean. It was really most provoking for Peter's mother, because she had not very much money to spend upon new clothes. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also had a little field in which she grew herbs and rabbit tobacco. This is what we call lavender. She hung it up to dry in the kitchen, in bunches, which she sold for a penny apiece to her rabbit neighbours in the warren. Did you ever happen to see a little old buck rabbit enjoying a pipe of rabbit tobacco? I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening, in consequence of having eaten too much in Mr. McGregor's garden. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter.
1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime.
But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. And that's the end of the story. That's the end. These ancient little children's stories are surprisingly subtle with the morals. Maybe subtle's not the word, but in any modern children's story or cartoon or whatever that's trying to teach them a lesson, it's guaranteed that somebody would just come flat out and say it right at the end. They just assume the children are too stupid to get the hint. There'd be somebody who would have to just bluntly say, "Now, we've learned today that being a good person is a good thing," essentially. But there's none of that in this. Squirrel Nutkin and Peter Rabbit just leave it entirely to the reader to figure out that you shouldn't go trespassing on people's land, and you shouldn't be rude to strangers. Or, well, rude to anybody, I suppose. Squirrel Nutkin very nearly meets the fate of, like, the child-friendly version of the fate at the hands of a paedophile, basically. And Peter Rabbit almost gets shot with a blunderbuss, like the Teletubbies creators ran the risk of doing every day when they filmed on his farm. So I think out of all these Beatrix Potter animal characters, Peter Rabbit is the most famous one. Is that right? I think he is. He's certainly he's like the one I know the most. I think Jemima Puddle Duck is another one. Jemima Puddle Duck and Squirrel Nutkin and Peter Rabbit are pretty much the only ones I've ever heard of. The only ones I can think of, at least. So I think I'll cover, if Jemima Puddle Duck was indeed the other one, then I'll find that and read that one out too. And then, feeling rather sick, in your own time, Windows Photo Viewer, in your own time. Nobody said you had to be the fastest gun in the West to load the Peter Rabbit pictures, but, well, it certainly helps. And furthermore, can I ask you why you're taking so long to do so? It's rather unbecoming of a computer application of the 2010s. Honestly, it's not terribly difficult. It is not terribly intensive on one's computer system's processor to load a JPG image of a 100-year-old storybook for small children. Deary me, whatever has the world come to? Cor blimey, governor, I mean, struth. What's the bright idea then? I'm gonna have to open the Internet Explorer version of this, eh? I think I am. Well, I've come this far, I might as well do so. Nothing will stop me. Not in my meaningless quest to read a 100-year-old children's storybook. Come on, get open it, get yourself, get the move of the ship, open yourself up, you stupid JPG. I see you there. You're gonna be opened by me. There's no breaking around it, no two ways about it, mate. Come on. You can't escape me. You might as well give up right now. Just give up right now. Just give it right now. Just give it right now. You stupid Windows 2000 and Windows Photo Viewer. Just give up now, you stupid Windows 2000 Photo Viewer. You don't have what it takes to beat me. You don't have what it takes. You can try and resist as long as you want. You're never going to manage to do it. You're not going to outdo me. I'll sit here and wait for you to load as long as it takes. I'll sit here and wait for you to load as long as it takes. So you might as well just stop pretending to be able to compete with me. You might as well. You should give up your act now. You should quit while you're ahead. You can't stare me down. I'll stare into your soul and make you back off. And you'll be sorry you ever crossed my path. Wow. Well, as I was saying then, he went home to look for some parsley. When Peter Rabbit went home to look for some parsley, he found himself in possession of parsley. When Peter Rabbit went to get some parsley, Peter Rabbit was off to find parsley. Parsley was what Rabbit Peter procured to satisfy his sickness, and then they went to Sclord. When Peter Rabbit came for parsley from Mr. McGregor, Peter Rabbit knew that he was being rather naughty, but Peter knew the best of all just what it means to be a rabbit. Round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet? Holy smokes, whom? using the word whom. I mean, this was back, well, that was back in the day and age when people used that word. Although if TV tropes is anything to go by, people still use that word. I hate the word whom. I can't believe this hasn't come up I can't believe this hasn't cropped up at any point in, like, in the Team Sponkel relations so far. I hate whom. The word whom is a waste of space. Kill it. Kill it with fire. Kill whom. Whom needs to die. I hate that word. I hate the word whom. I hate how everybody that uses it is like, knows how weird it sounds, but they just think they're so great for knowing the correct application. Nobody uses the word whom nowadays except to sound clever. You can't argue that. The only reason anybody uses the word whom now is to sound clever. But Peter Rabbit was a rambunctious young whipper-muffin. Castigated by his mother, doomed to haunt the halls of Aravate House for all time.
Kertstew! 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 Kertstew!
Peter sneezed.
Kertstew! Kertstew! Kertstew!